Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the LFS podcast with me, Kevin Ferris. This week on the show, a true Premier League classic was on display on Sunday as Liverpool snatched the 94th minute winner against Spurs in a 7-goal thriller at Anfield. And with Manchester City and Arsenal swapping top spotters, is the title race over? Or will it come down to the final day? Plus, after another horrific refereeing display at Anfield on Sunday, is it time to question whether or not the quality of referees in England is good enough? All of that and much more to come on this week's LFS podcast. Hello and welcome to this week's LFS podcast, episode 7 of the LFS podcast this week. We have a lot to get through this week, a lot of news stories to come, ones that are just breaking in and around recording the podcast today. But also, we have another huge topic to talk about this week, and that is the referees in England. We're going to have a full blown conversation around the referees and what the quality is with the referees. Is it good enough to be, refereeing the top level of football and probably one of the best leagues in the world at the minute? But first, let's get into this week's news. And Diogo Jota's injury time winner gave Liverpool a dramatic victory at Anfield after Tottenham looked on course to salvage a point despite going 3 goals behind inside 15 minutes. Spurs were 5-0 down after 20 minutes at Newcastle and swiftly found themselves 3 goals adrift at Anfield as Liverpool delivered an opening salvo that left them chasing what looked like a lost cause. Instead, when former Everton striker Richarlison headed his first Premier League goal of the season in stoppage time, Spurs were on the brink of rescuing an unlikely draw until Diogo Jota capitalised on a defensive mix-up seconds later to win the game for Liverpool. And Curtis Jones opened the scoring in the 3rd minute from Trent Alexander-Arnold's cross before Luis Diaz making his first start since suffering a knee injury in October that required surgery, turned in Mo Salah's delivery at the near post. Salah made amends for missing penalties against Bournemouth and Arsenal by adding the 3rd from the spot following Romero's reckless challenge on Cody Gakpo. With Spurs fans who were given a refund after the 6-1 debacle on Tyneside demanding their money back once more, they staged a fight back and showed real character. Harry Kane volleying home 6 minutes before the interval. Spurs actually had chances to give Liverpool even more anxious moments, but both Son Heung-min and Christian Romero hit the post within seconds in the second half. But Son then raced clear to beat Alisson, giving Spurs renewed hope with 13 minutes left. Richarlison sent the visiting fans wild with a header before Jota had the last word. Liverpool move up to 5th to retain slim hopes of Champions League football, but earlier victories for Manchester United and Newcastle made this an increasingly long shot. Amazing victory. We talk about these huge Premier League games and, these victories and high scoring games. This one will go down in history as to how dramatic it was. 2 late winners, 2 late goals in injury time. One to decide a Spurs draw and the other to give Liverpool the winner. And that will go down as a true Premier League classic, I believe. A first half header from Jota was enough to settle a tense Old Firm encounter at Hampden Park, sending Celtic into a Scottish Cup final against Inverness Caledonian Thistle. A catalogue of Rangers errors led to the only goal in 42 minutes, with Daisen Maeda profiting from hesitancy to provide the telling cross. Jota simply had the nod on target from a few yards out. Celtic will be firm favourites to complete a treble against Championship opposition on the 3rd of June, while Rangers, the defending champions, face up to a season without a trophy. The holders had chances to level in the second half, James Tavernier hitting the woodwork and Fashion Sakala guilty of a bad miss from the rebound. This was the 5th Old Firm meeting of the season, with Celtic well on top in the head-to-heads, winning 4 with 1 league draw at Ibrox, where the Glasgow rivals meet again in a fortnight. And Another interesting story this afternoon coming through to us. Argentina captain Lionel Messi has been suspended by PSG for 2 weeks after travelling to Saudi Arabia without the club's permission this week. The trip followed the French club's home defeat by Lorient on Sunday, in which Messi played the full 90 minutes. Messi will not train or play for PSG during the period of his suspension. It is understood the 35-year-old asked permission to make the journey to carry out commercial work, but was refused. Messi believes he did originally have permission to travel to Saudi, but that was then withdrawn due to a change in the club's training schedule. And Messi has also been fined by the club as a role as a tourism ambassador for Saudi Arabia. Moving then to Chelsea. An interim Chelsea manager, Frank Lampard, has warned it will take more than an overnight fix to turn the Blues' torrid form around. Chelsea lost 3-1 to London rivals on Arsenal on Tuesday. It was their 6th consecutive defeat, with the Blues now 12th in the Premier League table, 9 points above the relegation places. Lampard told Sky Sports, "We can't change things overnight, but we better get there quickly." Well, Chelsea were timid at Emirates Stadium, found themselves 3-0 down within 34 minutes. Noni Madueke pulled one back in the 65th minute, his first goal for the Blues, but a comeback never looked on. And former Liverpool defender Jimmy Carragher said on Sky Sports, "This club is an absolute mess at the moment. It is embarrassing for Chelsea. It's like five-a-side football." Scathing words there from Jimmy Carragher. And moving to the big sacking of the day, and Leeds have sacked manager Javi Gracia and have appointed former England boss Sam Allardyce in a bid to avoid relegation from the Premier League. Spaniard Gracia, appointed in February, has been dismissed after just 10 weeks and 12 games in charge at Elland Road. Allardyce, aged 68 now, is tasked with guiding 17th place Leeds, who are out of the bottom 3 only on goal difference, to safety with 4 games remaining. Listen to this. His first game in charge is against Manchester City on Saturday. Well, there you go. Big Sam's back in the big time. Oh my God. When is he ever going to stop? Like, is he ever going to just say, "You know what? This isn't for me. I've had enough." Plus, his football doesn't work. The last job he had at trying to save a Premier League team was West Brom, and they got relegated. So, you know, he's not the big genius that we all thought he was. His football does not work in the Premier League anymore. But with Leeds, 4 games to go, above on goal difference, they still have an opportunity to stay in the Premier League. But I'm sure Manchester City away will be one of their toughest tests, if not their toughest test, before the end of the season. Right, let's go to the top of the table then and have a look and see how that's looking. Arsenal's currently sit top of the table on 2 points clear of Manchester City. And Manchester City, however, have 2 games in hand on Arsenal, who've won their first game in 5 after beating Chelsea by 3-1 on Tuesday night. Well, it now means that really not much of a difference. If Manchester City beat West Ham United tonight, on the Wednesday night game, they will head back top of the table, a point ahead of Arsenal, and will have a game in hand over the London Gunners. It's still a long shot, but I wouldn't say the title race is over yet, because, let's not forget, West Ham took points off Manchester City last season in the title race. Yes, it was at London Stadium, and yes, it was a lot closer to the end of the season, but still, there's still hope. As long as there's games to play, there is still opportunities for both teams to slip up. Right then, that rounds up our news of the week. And next, we're going to talk about the referees after a torrid performance at Anfield on Sunday. Are the referees good enough? Welcome back to the podcast. Now, our big topic of the week is the question at the bottom of your screen. Are referees good enough? Well, we've seen some crazy refereeing decisions over the weekend and over the last few weeks in the Premier League, some changing results, some coming to really cause frustration within the clubs, the fan bases, plus also managerial staff as well. And the big one this week was, of course, Liverpool against Tottenham on Sunday, where Paul Tierney, according to some, missed 2 red cards. Now, on the screen, we're going to show you the two incidents, and you make your mind up whether or not they're red cards. Because for me, they're both red card offences. The first one that you're going to see is a foul on Luis Diaz by Oliver Skipp. Now, Oliver Skipp studs out, leading with his studs right onto the ankle, or just above the ankle, of Luis Diaz. He completely misses the ball, no attempt to get the ball whatsoever, completely stamps down on Luis Diaz, and for me, that is a red card. Now, considering that, the referee on the pitch didn't even give a foul, didn't give a free kick for a situation like that. Never mind a yellow card or even, God forbid, a red card. However, not even VAR thought it was an issue either. VAR said, no, you didn't make a mistake there, Paul. Let's move on. Another ridiculous decision. That how VAR missed it is beyond me. Then, let's move on to the second incident. Diogo Jota. How Diogo Jota was not sent off is another baffler. He literally kicked Oliver Skipp in the head. I don't care if he's going for the ball or not. He gets a touch on the ball, but he follows through onto the head of a Spurs player. It's a high boot. And high boot challenges like that are red card offences. Not all of them, but a vast majority of them are. When you get your boot that high and get some of the ball and follow through on a player, that should be a red card. He drew blood from the Spurs player. High and good Christ, do you not give a red card for that? That completely baffles me. And that's why this topic has emerged. That's why I wanted to talk about this topic this week, because it's such a frustrating thing. The referees aren't good enough. And people are going to continue to blame VAR and say the technology's not doing its job. The technology cannot decide for the referees. The referees make the final decision. The VAR, or the video assistant, just assists the referee using video. It's simple as that. It's just a system of replays. That's all that is. It's the way it's being used and the way it's being interpreted and the way that the referee in the booth is using it is what's wrong, not the VAR or the technology itself. Now, talking about this in a way, the referees, I think, are afraid to overturn decisions. I think they don't know what way to go. 1 week, they're going over to the screen and checking things, and there's complaints that they're taking too long. But the point that I would make, they have to get the right decision. I don't care how long it takes you, add as long as you want on, as long as the right decision is taken on the pitch. That's what VAR was brought in for. Remember, the whole reason VAR was introduced was because referees on the pitch were having howlers of decisions, given goals that shouldn't have been given red cards that shouldn't be given, mistaken identity. All these situations caused frustration because there was no other way of dealing with it. The referee got it wrong and that was it. VAR was introduced for that, to get the correct decision. Not to re-referee a game, not to really completely redirect, refereeing opinions or subjective matters. They're there to imply the rules and impose the rules. But also, they're not there to really, take away from the referee in the game, if you know what I mean. They're there to do a job, and yes, they're there to do a job and to make sure the correct decision is met. But I think they're confused. I don't understand what the referees are trying to do now. I don't think they know exactly what their purpose is anymore. Because for 1 minute, they're trying to get the right decision. And the next minute, they're trying to say, well, no, is it above the threshold, whatever that means? And then they try and say, is it clear and obvious? Well, no. Just get the right decision. Stop making it more complicated than it needs to be. There was another incident last night in the Arsenal game. Arsenal against Chelsea, where there was a handball incident. Referee didn't look at it. No problem. Referee didn't think it was a handball. However, the point I would make is, how is the Everton handball a penalty against Leicester on Monday night when that one isn't? It's identical. Michael Keane had his arm outstretched, and I couldn't remember what Chelsea player it was, but one of the Chelsea players had their arm outside of their body statue, outside of their, their main body. How is that not a penalty? These frustrating, inconsistent decisions every single week from the referees is bringing them under so much scrutiny, and rightfully so. They should be scrutinised. That's what referees are there. They're there to referee the game and to get the correct decision. And when they don't get the correct decisions, they should be scrutinised, of which they are. But this time, before VAR, you could excuse them and say they're only human. Whereas now, you can't use that excuse. There are cameras everywhere inside every stadium in the Premier League. You cannot miss an incident. You can't. Because the VAR has the luxury of every single camera angle within the stadium. However, they're still getting decisions wrong. How? I do not know. I really do not know. And a point was made on Sunday after this whole incident about red cards and things, and they were talking on Sky Sports about it. And one thing that was mentioned was these referees could name you every single law in the rule book, but they don't know about in-game incidents. The likes of that Diogo Jota challenge, how that is not a red card, is beyond me. The referee probably has some bullshit rule excuse to give you, but at the end of the day, that is a dangerous challenge. You're really could be endangering an opponent, which is a red card offence. So don't get me with rules. You can have all the rules you want, but if you cannot get in-game decisions correct, you're a useless, waste of space referee that has no purpose in the game and really should be sacked on the spot. And I think Paul Tierney has got away with it far too long, along with many other referees. Yes, they can make mistakes. That can happen. But to miss 2 red cards in the same game and make sure, do you know how referees had a bad game? When both sets of fans are angry at the referee. The Spurs fans were angry at the referee for not giving a red card against Diogo Jota, and the Liverpool fans were angry at the referee for not giving a red card against Oliver Skip on Luis Diaz. That shows you exactly how bad the referee is. If both sets of fans are saying the referee had a bad performance, you know the referee had a bad performance. And the fact that VAR couldn't fix that shows how incompetent the referees are overall, that they can't even use the screens and the monitors that help them to give definitive decisions and give the correct decision on an incident. It's completely ridiculous, and how it's being put up with and backed by the FA and the PGMOL, how they can back this shambolicness of refereeing is ridiculous. And I'm totally in disbelief about it, really, because these incidents that they're missing could change results. Ryan Mason said it in his post-match press conference at Anfield on Sunday. If Diogo Jota is sent off, he doesn't score that winning goal. If Oliver Skip isn't on the pitch, Diogo Jota might not have got that yellow card, and Diogo Jota might not have been on the pitch. It's a domino effect. If Diogo Jota was sent off, which I do think he should have been, who's to say Liverpool didn't go on and score that winner? Who's to say that ended 3-3? Because then Liverpool would have been down to 10 men. They wouldn't be throwing everything at the game. Spurs at that moment, I think, were 3-1 or 3-2. They were pushing on. They would feel even more buoyed by the fact that Liverpool went down to 10 men and possibly could have won the game, Spurs. So it just shows you that the referee makes an instant decision, completely gets it wrong, isn't rectified by VAR, and it can end up changing the result of a match. Spurs were involved in one of these types of games previously. It went for them that day because it was against Brighton, and Brighton were absolutely robbed on many occasions. I don't know who the referee was on that day, but they're all shit anyway. How they didn't give so many decisions for Brighton on that day is beyond me. And they changed the result of that game. If they'd given Brighton a penalty, they could have got a draw. If they didn't give one of the Spurs goals, which should have been disallowed, or gave one of the Brighton goals that should have been allowed, they would have completely changed the game. But the fact that they are making these awful decisions are ruining teams and changing results of games. And you can't allow that. That's just not acceptable. It's just not good enough. And to that question, are English referees poor or are they good enough? They're not good enough, and they are incredibly poor. And that's putting it so nicely, because they are absolutely awful. Awful. Now, on the the Paul Tierney and Jurgen Klopp incident on Sunday. Now, Jurgen Klopp said in his pre-match press conference for Fulham yesterday, on Tuesday, he said to me, for me it's a red, but because of him it's a yellow. Then the fourth official. That's after Jurgen Klopp was a bit overexcited when celebrating that Liverpool goal in the 94th minute. Of course, there's a whole investigation into that and how should Jurgen Klopp be given a match ban. I agree. He should. And he knows that. He's apologised. But he should be given a touchline ban, because you can't act like that in front of a referee or to an officiating team. It's just not acceptable. And, we say how poor the referees are, but they get constant abuse from all sides. And on many occasions, if those at the top are doing it, Jurgen Klopp's a role model for many. If Jurgen Klopp's out doing it, what's to say that younger kids won't see that and want to do that too? And the continuing abuse of referees will continue time and time and time again, and we won't ever get anywhere, and we'll turn the referees away from the game, and the officiating will get even worse than what it already is. And that's something we cannot afford to let happen. Really, genuinely, honestly, it just can't happen. They're already bad enough. Please, God, do not make them any worse than what they are. All right, that is it. That wraps up this week's LFS podcast. Don't forget, though, to follow us on our social pages as well: Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at LFStreams2 on all of those platforms if you would like to really get involved with the show and get involved with us here on LFS and the LFS podcast. Right. I'd just like to say we're back next week again, once again, every week here on the channel, and we'll have some big weeks in the LFS podcast to come over the next couple of weeks, with the end of seasons coming up, plus finals and everything. But do keep coming your comments and questions and anything you would like us to answer here on LFS podcast coming in over the next few weeks. And we'll get to those towards the end of the season. Thank you very much again for listening and watching, and we'll see you next week on the LFS podcast.